อบคุณภูเขาทะเลที่พาให้เราได้มาพบกันจนเราผูกพันกันมาแสนนานกี่พันปัญหาใดๆที่เราร่วมกันก้าวผ่านจนวันนี้ล้อมรวมเป็นหนึ่งเดียวพวกเราร่วมกันเป็นผู้เดินนำการท่องเที่ยวจนก้าวไกลมือทั้งสองคอยโอบประคองให้บ้านชื่อไทยสุขใจหนึ่งรอยยิ้มของใครก็มีความหมายทำให้พวกเรายังก้าวไปด้วยหัวใจสื่อตรงที่จะทำดีหนึ่งรอยยิ้มของใครก็ดูยิ่งใหญ่เตือนให้พวกเราได้เข้าใจว่าเพื่อใครที่ฉันต้องดูแลบ้านของเราให้ดีพวกเราร่วมกันเป็นผู้เดินนำการท่องเที่ยวจนก้าวไกลมือทั้งสองคอยโอบประคองให้บ้านชื่อไทยสุขใจหนึ่งรอยยิ้มของใครก็มีความหมายทำให้พวกเรายังก้าวไปด้วยหัวใจสื่อตรงที่จะทำดีหนึ่งรอยยิ้มของใครก็ดูยิ่งใหญ่เตือนให้พวกเราได้เข้าใจว่าเพื่อใครที่ฉันต้องดูแลบ้านของเราให้ดีพวกเราร่วมกันเป็นผู้เดินนำการท่องเที่ยวจนก้าวไกลมือทั้งสองคอยโอบประคองให้บ้านชื่อไทยสุขใจหนึ่งรอยยิ้มของใครก็มีความหมายทำให้พวกเรายังก้าวไปด้วยหัวใจสื่อตรงที่จะทำดีหนึ่งรอยยิ้มของใครก็ดูยิ่งใหญ่เตือนให้พวกเราได้เข้าใจว่าเพื่อใครที่ฉันต้องดูแลบ้านของเราให้ดีจะทุ่มเทตลอดไปเพราะเมืองไทยคือหัวใจของเราขอบคุณภูเขาทะเลที่พาให้เราได้มาพบกันจนเราผูกพันกันมาแสนนานกี่พันปัญหาใดๆที่เราร่วมกันก้าวผ่านจนวันนี้ล้อมรวมเป็นหนึ่งเดียวพวกเราร่วมกันเป็นผู้เดินนำการท่องเที่ยวจนก้าวไกลมือทั้งสองคอยโอบประคองให้บ้านชื่อไทยสุขใจหนึ่งรอยยิ้มของใครก็มีความหมายทำให้พวกเรายังก้าวไปด้วยหัวใจสื่อตรงที่จะทำดีหนึ่งรอยยิ้มของใครก็ดูยิ่งใหญ่เตือนให้พวกเราได้เข้าใจว่าเพื่อใครที่ฉันต้องดูแลบ้านของเราให้ดี กเราร่วมกันเป็นผู้เดินนำการท่องเที่ยวจนก้าวไกลมือทั้งสองคอยโอบประคองให้บ้านชื่อไทยสุขใจหนึ่งรอยยิ้มของใครก็มีความหมายทำให้พวกเรายังก้าวไปด้วยหัวใจซื่อตรงที่จะทำดีหนึ่งรอยยิ้มของใครก็ดูยิ่งใหญ่เตือนให้พวกเราได้เข้าใจว่าเพื่อใครที่ฉันต้องดูแลบ้านของเราให้ดีกันเป็นผู้เดินนำการท่องเที่ยวจนก้าวไกลมือทั้งสองคอยโอบประคองให้บ้านชื่อไทยสุขใจหนึ่งรอยยิ้มของใครก็มีความหมายทำให้พวกเรายังก้าวไปด้วยหัวใจซื่อตรงที่จะทำดีหนึ่งรอยยิ้มของใครก็ดูยิ่งใหญ่เตือนให้พวกเราได้เข้าใจว่าเพื่อใครที่ฉันต้องดูแลบ้านของเราให้ดีจะทุ่มเทตลอดไปเพราะเมืองไทยคือหัวใจของเราขอบคุณภูเขาทะเลที่พาให้เราได้มาพบกันจนเราผูกพันกันมาแสนนานกี่พันปัญหาใดๆที่เราร่วมกันก้าวผ่านจนวันนี้ล้อมรวมเป็นหนึ่งเดียวพวกเราร่วมกันเป็นผู้เดินนำการท่องเที่ยวจนก้าวไกลมือทั้งสองคอยโอบประคองให้บ้านชื่อไทยสุขใจหนึ่งรอยยิ้มของใครก็มีความหมายทำให้พวกเรายังก้าวไปด้วยหัวใจซื่อตรงที่จะทำดีหนึ่งรอยยิ้มใครก็ดูยิ่งใหญ่เตือนให้พวกเราได้เข้าใจว่าเพื่อใครที่ฉันต้องดูแลบ้านของเราให้ดีพวกเราร่วมกันเป็นผู้เดินนำการท่องเที่ยวจนก้าวไกลมือทั้งสองคอยโอบประคองให้บ้านชื่อไทยสุขใจหนึ่งรอยยิ้มของใครก็มีความหมายทำให้พวกเรายังก้าวไปด้วยหัวใจซื่อตรงที่จะทำดีหนึ่งรอยยิ้มใครก็ดูยิ่งใหญ่เตือนให้พวกเราได้เข้าใจว่าเพื่อใครที่ฉันต้องดูแลบ้านของเราให้ดีพวกเราร่วมกันเป็นผู้เดินนำการท่องเที่ยวจนก้าวไกล มือทั้งสองคอยโอบประคองให้บ้านชื่อไทยสุขใจ
I see new horizons are opening up new feelings. I feel great in every moment when I see the world around me. It makes me
Open to the new shades. Amazing Thailand.
สวัสดีค่ะ Good afternoon everyone and welcome to the TAT webinar, and TAT would like to encourage everyone to continue to wear a mask outside the home when out in public to prevent the spread of the COVID-19. Once again, I am Piraya Tangdamrongtham from the Europe, Africa and Middle East Market Division, Tourism Authority of Thailand Head Office in Bangkok. On behalf of the TAT team, I would like to thank you for joining this webinar session presenting features and trends of Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan travel markets in current situation by the TAT Moscow office. And just a few housekeeping notes before we get started. If you have any questions for our speakers, please type them into the Q&A box. On notebook or PC, the Q&A icon is on the left, and if you're joining on your mobile phone, it's on top of the screen. You can also vote for questions that you like in the Q&A box, and the questions that receive the most votes will be asked and answered by our speakers first. And on the bottom right of the screen, there's a chat box where you can chat with other webinar participants and communicate with our admin team in case you experience any difficulties during the live session. And just a little reminder that what's written in this chat box will not be shown to our speakers. Therefore, if you have any questions for our speakers, please make sure you type them into the Q&A box. And at the end of the session, we'd like to ask your kind cooperation to fill in our short survey using the questionnaire icon located next to the Q&A. Here, you can leave your valuable feedback and also suggest topics you want us to cover in future sessions. And lastly, this webinar is being recorded. If you would like to watch it again, you can use the same URL and access code or visit our TAT website, tourismthailand.org/webinar, and go to the past event section. And now, everyone, please allow me to introduce our speakers. First, Kun Anoma Wongyai, the Director of Tourism Authority of Thailand, Moscow office. สวัสดีค่ะ
สวัสดีค่ะ
She will begin with a 5-minute topic introduction about the Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan and overall of the CIS countries. And next, would you please welcome our market expert, Mr. Valikan Alishev. He's a TAT marketing representative for the Kazakhstan and Central Asian markets. He will give you the information on economic outlook, market insights, together with the overall current situation during the COVID-19 in both Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. And in summary, there will be 40 minutes of presentations and 15-minute Q&A opportunity at the end. And now, without further ado, we will turn the time over to our director, Kun Anoma Wongyai, the Director of Tourism Authority of Thailand, Moscow office. Kun Anoma, over to you.
สวัสดีค่ะ Good afternoon, all TAT webinar participants. Today's session is another session from TAT Moscow office. As I told you last week, apart from the Russian market, our office also take care of another 9 former Soviet Union countries. So those who are interested in Russian markets, I would like you to do not think only the pure Russian tourists, because we have a huge territory, huge region. So when we talk about your customer from CIS countries, it doesn't mean only from Russia, but it's also from other countries which people have some similar characteristics, some similar preferences and behaviors to Russian people. And among our responsible countries, Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan is the second and the third largest market to Thailand, respectively. This number in the slides are regarding on the by country of residence instead of nationalities. However, both countries also have a direct, regular and charter flights to Thailand as well. So you can see the opportunities for the whole wider picture of the market. And another good point is that both countries are much have much less COVID-19 infected people if compared to Russia. So it means it have an opportunity to get back to normal or to recover earlier. And next, Mr. Well Alisha, TAT marketing representative from Kazakhstan, will present you the market insight of Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan market, the current situation and the trend after the pandemic. I will pass over to Will. Let's start. Thank you.
Good morning and good afternoon. Thank you for introduction, Anoma. Let's have a short look at what Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan countries are, what is the situation in terms of travel in the past years, and we'll make a short overview of the current COVID-related situation in both countries, as well as we'll try to make some focus for the upcoming future in the post-COVID era, let's say. Next slide, please. Like Anoma said, Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan are amongst the former Soviet countries. Both countries reside right in the center of Eurasian continent, and it's very significant and interesting cultures, which we'll try to explain how it affects the tourist behavior. Kazakhstan is a multinational country. The population is represented by Kazakhs, Russians, Ukrainians, Koreans, and even Germans. We speak Kazakh language here, but Russian language is spoken by about 75-80% of people in the country. So basically, two languages are common in our country. Kazakhstan exports oil and gas, agricultural products, chemicals, and it exports mining products as well. We still very much rely on mineral resources and oil and gas exports, and therefore we may be quite vulnerable to oil prices movements. Kazakh population is mainly represented by Muslims, but other religions are also present in the country, with Orthodox Christianity amongst them as the second biggest group of people in the country. And it's been the second best performing economy amongst the former Soviet countries. Next slide, please. In terms of GDP, we're ranked at the 55th place in the world ranking. What's interesting about Kazakhstan is it has a huge territory. We say it equals to 5 territories of France, but surprisingly, the number of people living in the country is relatively small. It's only 19 million people, which makes the density of population here quite low, only 7 people per kilometer, sorry. With, in terms of largest cities in the country, we have 3 cities over 1 million people living in. They are Almaty, Nur-Sultan, which is the capital, and Shymkent in the south of the country. Next slide, please. Uzbekistan, an exciting and interesting country in the heart of Central Asia. It is represented by also many nationals, including Uzbeks, Kazakhs, Russians, Ukrainians, and so forth, quite many. Significant that Uzbekistan is amongst the top exporters of cotton in the world. It has some of the top resources or deposits of gold. And overall, Uzbekistan is a promising country because about 2 years ago, the government changed and there are some political changes in the world which is making Uzbekistan a more open, more transparent country. Next slide, please. Although in terms of area, Uzbekistan is not a huge country. The number of people is astonishing. There are about 38 million people living in Uzbekistan, and the population density is quite high, which is 74 people per square kilometer. It is on the 78th place in the global GDP ranking. And like I said, the economy of Uzbekistan is very promising, and we really want to have a look and keep our eye on what's going on in this country and how it changes in terms of tourist outflow. Next slide, please. Let's have a look at how both countries address the COVID situation and what's going on right now in terms of restrictive measures. But before we'll have a very short look at what was the situation in terms of outbound tourism flow from both countries. As you can see, Thailand is amongst the top 5 most popular destinations in Kazakhstan in terms of non-CIS countries. And we have seen about 80 million and slightly over 18 million people in the past 2 years traveling to Thailand from our country, which is quite a steady level for a number of years. Next slide, please. As you can see, in the past 3 years, the number of people arriving from Kazakhstan was quite steady, slightly over 50,000 people. But also in the graph, you can see that we have some lower level of arrivals in 1915 and 1916, which was due to national currency denomination that took place back in 2014 through 2015. It affects buying power of people in Kazakhstan. But in 2017, the demand for travel to Thailand has gotten back to normal and remained quite the same for the past 3 years. Next slide. Thailand is also amongst the top destinations for Uzbeks, along with Turkey, South Korea, United Arab Emirates, China, and USA. What's interesting there is that back in 2017, we had only almost 7 million people traveling to not only Thailand, but all other international destinations. And just next year, the number of people more than actually doubled, which is quite an interesting fact. And we think it's connected with the shift in political and economical situation in the country, which allowed more people to leave the country, to travel more and buy more services and products. Although the relative number of people from Uzbekistan is not very high, but I think, and we think, that the country has a huge potential considering the economic perspective, considering the number of people living in the country, which makes it the next most interesting country after Kazakhstan in terms of tourist flow expectations in the coming year, or at least we focused at that. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. Well, in terms of seasonality, Kazakhstan and Uzbekistani tourists have some common traits with Russian tourists as well. We mainly travel from October till March, April, and that is high season for both countries. And normally we stay in Thailand for 14, 15 days. I think this trend and these statistics are in general quite the same for all post-Soviet and probably other countries as well. Next slide, please. Well, I mentioned a few competing countries in Thailand, and those were China, South Korea, Turkey, Egypt, United Arab Emirates. There are a couple other competing countries as well. Those are European Union, Malaysia, and Georgia, which is very specific in Kazakhstan. There are both charter and regular flights from Kazakhstan to Thailand, and the number of flights may be up to 14 flights per week from Kazakhstan. In terms of Uzbekistan, there are regular flights to Thailand, which may be about 5 times a week. The destinations in Thailand are Bangkok, Phuket, and Utapao. Next slide, please. Yes, I'm ready. Let's have a look at how the tourist profile look like from Kazakhstan. Well, first of all, the majority of people traveling are families. They amount for about 60% of the total outbound flow to Thailand. The next huge group of people are young people who might be single, who might be couples. They are about 25 to 36, 37 of age. And the reasons to travel to Thailand are obviously recreation, beach holidays, but also health and wellness. And there are also some other things like the tourists from here are looking for halal and Muslim friendly countries as well. There is a number of both local and international travel agencies and operators working in Kazakhstan. In terms of international players, those are Annex, Testor, Pegas Touristic. And local travel operators, the major ones are Castor, Kazunian, and Compass. We have 2 airlines from Kazakhstan to Thailand, the Air Astana, which is a national air carrier, and the private companies Sunday Airlines, who make charter flights to Thailand. It was very simple to get to Thailand visa-wise until March this year, but we're expecting and hoping that the free visa on arrival will be resumed sometime in the future, which will make it easier for our tourists to go to Thailand. Anyway, there is an opportunity to have a visa in advance in the local consulates and also by the embassy. Okay, next slide, please. Well, generally, like Anoma said, the tourists from other countries of the former Soviet Union have quite the same traits as the Russian tourists do. Those are mainly family members. Sometimes full families travel to Thailand. Very often, only daughters and moms with children travel to Thailand. But generally, everybody is looking for beach holidays and recreation. Much less so far wellness and health reasons. For Uzbekistan, it's also important that the country is Muslim friendly and have a halal food opportunity during flights and while staying in the country. Another interesting thing about Uzbekistan that mostly men travel so far. There are about 60% more men traveling from Uzbekistan than women. And also because Uzbekistan has remained quite close and conservative for some time, there are some language barriers here. The country is less integrated into world economy, and therefore language barriers still exist, but we expect that this will change eventually. Interesting thing is about tourists from Uzbekistan that many travel for tourists because Muay Thai sports is quite popular in the country. Uzbeks also enjoyed free visa on arrival until March this year, and we hope it will continue. As for key players working on the Uzbek travel market, those are Dover, Maxwin, Dolores, Nasip Tour, Test Tour, which is an international travel operator, Ecotour, and some other local players. One airline is going from Uzbekistan to Thailand on a regular basis, which is Uzbekistan Airlines. And we can continue. Well, like I said before, people from both countries tend to stay for about 14, 15 days in Thailand. The peak seasons for that are longest holidays that take place on January, which is a new year, and in March, which is a traditional new year called Nowruz in Kazakhstan or Novruz in Uzbekistan. A number of holidays we have on those national holidays is up to 6 days, and people tend to book trips to Thailand on those days. But there is a long period of school holidays from June to August. This is when people may travel to Thailand as well with families and children. Next slide, please. Well, let's have a look at what's the situation right now in terms of COVID. Like Anoma said, Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan have some of the lowest levels of new cases and lowest levels of death. A number of total infected people in Kazakhstan is almost 3,000, in Uzbekistan almost 3,000, and a very low level of deaths. It's 12 right now. It's quite significant that the country is holding such a low position in terms of new cases and total cases, and also high level of recovered people from the disease. Let's have a look at how it looks like in Kazakhstan. Next slide, please. In Kazakhstan, we have slightly higher numbers than Uzbekistan, but still very low compared to some other countries, including Russia, which has taken the second place in terms of new cases and total number of infected. We have a little more than 6,000 people who are infected right now, but the rate of new cases has remained quite steady in the past couple of weeks. We have slightly more than 1,000 people, slightly more than 100 people, on a daily basis, but this rate is not increasing over time and remains quite steady, which gives us hope that Kazakhstan will be fully or close to being fully recovered in quite short period of time. Next slide, please. I think one of the reasons might be that Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan took very quick steps to implement measures to stop COVID in quite short period of time. Both countries implemented international travel ban on March 16th, and it's still in effect, obviously. And there is a package of actually restrictive measures being taken by both countries. Next slide, please. And those measures were, next slide, please. Okay. The measures taken by the Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, first of all, were obviously ban of international travel, but also within the country, the movement of people and transportation was banned, and it's actually still much in effect till this day. Basically, all public businesses, including restaurants, cafes, bars, and other public places, were shut down and mainly remain shut down by this moment. Universities, schools, kindergartens were closed as well, and they remain closed by this time. This situation is quite common for both countries, Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan, but there are some easing measures taking place right now. For instance, two major cities in Kazakhstan, which are Almaty and Nur-Sultan, are opening bars and restaurants, cafes and cafeterias today on May the 18th. Only a certain group of those restaurants and bars can be opened. They have to have at most 30 places or 30 seats inside, or have summer terraces. But still, we're seeing some recovery, and the Kazakh government developed a roadmap to eventually ease the restrictive measures. Next slide, please. One more slide. The roadmap is quite simple. If we have 7% of new cases only within the next 7 days, then the new package of easing restrictions would be implemented. The next milestone is 5%, and the next is 2%. So if we have a steady 5, 7, or 2% in the next 7 days, then the government or local governments will implement easing measures on business operations, on travel, on movement of people, and so forth. Right now, we're expecting to have domestic flights across 13 regions in Kazakhstan opening up, and we're expecting 4 international destinations for air travel to open in the end of May and in sometime in June. Those destinations are Russia, Germany, Israel, and another destination as well. So the situation in Kazakhstan is hard to say positive, but it's not negative as in the majority of other countries, which gives us hope we'll be recovered soon. As for Uzbekistan, on the next slide, the current situation remains quite strict. The quarantine was prolonged, extended till June the 2nd, which is quite short period of time left till this period of time. And Uzbekistan seemed to eventually lift the restrictions and allow people to leave home for short time with children. Some operations, business operations, are back to normal. Those include some services like auto repairs, real estate agencies, and some other sorts of services to public. Agricultural products are now allowed to cross the regions in Uzbekistan without any limitation, and people are allowed to move throughout cities and across regions in their own vehicles. The restrictions remain quite strict in Uzbekistan so far, but we also see some development to make them easier in the coming weeks. So this gives us hope that we will see some more interesting data on active businesses, including travel organizations, going back to normal. Next slide, please. Well, both governments in both countries have taken some pretty significant measures to fight the coronavirus consequences. The economic and social consequences are quite bad. We all understand that. And the Kazakh government allocated about $10 billion to fight those consequences. It represents about 6% of the annual GDP of the country, and we are amongst the top countries in terms of share of money allocated to fight COVID compared to the GDP. The government introduced some corporate tax relief measures. It has launched programs to support businesses through lowered rates on business credit. It has introduced some programs to support those groups of people who suffered hardest from the COVID, and provided minimum wage salaries from the state government, which equals to $100, and those payments were made to individuals 2 times already to support those who lost their jobs or cannot work due to a homestay regime. Next slide, please. Uzbekistan has attained some help from World Bank and some other financial organizations to fight COVID, and the total amount of money that was approved to Uzbekistan exceeds $1 $100 million so far. In terms of tax reliefs, charity, and special programs for businesses, to support individuals who suffered the most, who lost their jobs and don't have income right now. So both countries have gotten quite confident measures to support the economy. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay. Okay. Impact on the about travel market. Well, we estimate that the
Yes, so the speakers has a little bit problem with the internet connection, and he will reconnect. I think I see him here now, so I'll get him back on the screen. Hi, welcome back.
I'm back.
So the connection is still unstable. Maybe I'll invite the director, Kunanoma, to share some information about this market while he's trying to reconnect. Yeah. Kunanoma, can I please go back?
Yes, okay. So I will explain next slide regarding to well presentation. Yeah, when we talk about the factor that will be affect for the tourist confidence, of course, they have people still there are many factors, and like for the new wave, for the even now we have a bit positive trend for Kazakh and Uzbek market, but we are not sure for new waves will happen or not until vaccine available, and the flight airport security, and is also one of like a limitation of people sentiment to would like to travel or not if have a lot of limitation or regulation in about the flight or the at the airport, and also about our economic income of the people also, that is another effect for people to for tourist decision to travel or not. And next slide. Yeah, welcome back. Okay, you explain.
Probably it was a connectivity loss.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Anoma. Let me start from the left. So country-specific factors in Kazakhstan, Anoma explained those, and we think that resulting from those factors, we can expect that the tourists will be willing to travel to Thailand once the borders are open and we have air flights resumed. And we think this will be effective for both middle range budget groups, also with some decline and also high class will likely to travel again in the next available season. Next slide, please. We talk to people trying to find out what their expectations about going to Thailand this year. And one of the things that we heard many times from people we talked with was that they are going to jump on the plane the first moment it's available and they want to travel. There is a thing called revenge consumption, when people, after long stay home and inability to have an active social and economic life, want to actually actively go back to spending, to consuming, and so forth. And there is another driver for going to Thailand for many people from Kazakhstan, is that many have some really specific relationships with Thailand, and they want to go back to Thailand each year, and economic or money situation does not stop them from going to Thailand this year or next one. Next slide, please. From the conversations with travel agencies and operators, we have seen a few insights here. Well, the majority of travel operators are refraining from focusing the situation in the coming season. So their strategy is just wait and see, because the situation is too indefinite, and we have to wait and see what happens next, they say. But also, in terms of expectations from tourists, they think that our tourists, like Russian tourists as well, will want to travel when they have the closest opportunity, regardless of economic and other situation. They want to go back to travel, and it's very important part of post-Soviet people to have an opportunity to leave countries for some time and spend elsewhere. Well, another observation is that we actually expect that quite a number of travel agencies will be gone from the market, but it has its own benefits as well. The travel operators say that probably the most professional and most reliable agencies will stay in the market, which will give the tourists a benefit of a more professional and more reliable services. Next slide, please. Well, what other people saying about the possible forecasts? Well, this is a common forecast that the travel industry and air travel industry will be fully back to normal in 1 year. These are the words of Peter Foster, who is the president of Air Astana, the national air carrier of Kazakhstan. So there are different opinions, but we basically believe, of course, that globally the situation will probably back to close to normal in 1 or 2 years, but in short time people will want to go back, if that's possible, to traveling abroad. Next slide, please. Well, like I said before, Kazakhstan is now resuming domestic air flights and passenger railroad operations, and resuming some of the international flights as well. Despite some expectations, the immunity passport or medical certificate for COVID-19 test is not required on the transportation. Both air and railroad transportation do not require any sort of medical certificate. And also, we haven't applied any social distancing measures on board or inside railroad wagons, as well as buses. So the travel may be not such a big nightmare as we might have expected, at least in Kazakhstan. Of course, the sanitizers are now in all public places. The body temperature screening is now conducted when entering the airports or entering a flight craft aircrafts. And of course, the transportation are being sanitized much more often right now, which is quite a common procedure throughout all countries, I believe. In Uzbekistan, the situation in terms of new normal for travel is slightly different. Next slide, please. People are required to have an immunity certificate to start travel on the airplane or railroad, and the test has to be taken within 120 hours prior to travel. Also, no social distancing implemented on the transportation so far. Let's go to the next slide. We tried to come up with worst case and best case scenarios, and I think the worst case scenario would be that the next high season starting in October or fall 2020 will not be available for travel. And this will probably affect the winter season as well, but we still hope, even in the worst case scenario, that the winter season starting January, February will be still available for travel. Best case scenario is that the borders are open before the high season and the air travel is back to normal. And the tourists from Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan are going back to Thailand in October. Next slide. If we have a worst case scenario and later we understand that the Thailand is not available for travel in September, October, November, then we probably will have to anyway keep in touch with local travel agencies and operators, collaborate with them and educate, because we have an opportunity to do so. We would also have to engage with consumers to build confidence, to build expectations, because the borders will be opened nonetheless in the coming seasons. And we want to reach them over different channels and media formats, where digital would be the first, of course. Next one. In case of best case scenario, of course, we have to build expectations on the closest season starting October and provide a value proposition to tourists trying or willing to travel. And also there is another group of tourists who actually missed their summer vacation due to coronavirus. And I think we should try to have those tourists make decisions to travel to Thailand on the high season starting October, because their summer vacations were actually lost. Next slide, please. Well, in terms of how we want to collaborate, engage travel agencies and operators. Well, pretty much the same situation that we have implemented before. We have to engage with them through seminars, through workshops, through webinars, through educational and information events. Also, we have to consider that in new reality suggests that digital technologies and live streaming is becoming a big part of our lives, and we might want to use that in working with local travel agencies and operators as well. And of course, we have to build and bring the confidence from the travel agencies and travel operators in regards to the destination as well, as they struggle to compensate for losses they suffered in March, April, and will suffer in summer as well. Next slide, please. Well, in terms of working with clients and tourists, we think that basically the situation is quite the same. The Thailand is a source of storytelling, a source of inspirational stories. And they think that we have to continue doing that through various channels, through various formats, and develop storytelling through social media, influencer marketing, and some other formats as well. So we think that digital and social media would be very important to promote the destination to local tourists through storytelling techniques. Next, please. And the last slide is a kind of a general conclusion of what is going on in terms of new behavior, not only tourists, but people in general. We have seen that online pushed further in many directions, and we have to, I think, implement online technologies or digital technologies and digital marketing much more actively to reach our customers. We also have seen that after a long period of stay home, the life experiences and mobility has become a very valuable asset. I wouldn't say that travel will become luxury again, but promoting life experiences that are available in Thailand and ability to actually travel, those are the things that we think will be very vital. And as you can see right now, the communications has become less formal, and I think it's a huge advantage to connect with the consumers and tourists for us. So I have to wrap up. Those are the major things we might consider when developing marketing and promotional activities for both Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan. Thank you for your attention, and I'll be glad to answer your questions.
Thank you, Valkan, for sharing such useful information about Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan travel markets in current situation. Also, with shown different scenarios, very informative and useful in the past 40 minutes. And I'm very impressive to know that these two countries have combated with the COVID-19 very well and have now really low new case rates. So now we'll go ahead and take some time for the Q&A questions. So for those of you who have not submitted the questions, please be sure to type them into the Q&A box, the questions that received the most votes will likely be asked and answered first. Please now welcome our presenters back on the screen to start the Q&A session. Okay, see the first question coming up now. In the TAT Russian presentation, focus was very much on lower price and smaller hotels for the recovery. Thoughts for the CAS? So this is from the past presentation by Annex Tour. She was talking about how big tour operators are using the price as a factor for their clients to book packages. So what about the CAS, Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan?
Well, partially I think it will be effective and relevant to our countries as well. For instance, in Kazakhstan, like I said, we have suffered another wave of currency devaluation against dollar and euro. The whole situation is not very good as well. So the expectations of tourists would probably lower prices for hotel and other things that they have to pay for while traveling. But I have to say that important thing is that not a lower price and small hotels would be an attraction for tourists from CIS, but the experience that they have from visiting Thailand. And I think we have to keep emphasizing, keep stressing out that Thailand is land of exotic experiences, and many people actually start saving money for Thailand trip well before the actual trip. And there is a special place in the heart of many Kazakh Uzbek tourists to Thailand for this country. And of course, the lower prices would benefit the tourist flow. I think it should be considered because the buying power of people is becoming less. But we're also talking about different groups of people. There is a high class of travelers who suffered less in these circumstances, and they are still able to buy villas or rent villas, to buy value-added services, and actually be quite comfortable doing so. So I think it very much depends on the group of people we're talking about.
Okay, thank you, Valikan. So Of course, the price, lower price will attract, certain group of tourists, like the mass tourists who come on charter flights. But there's also other groups of tourists as well who have buying power and, would willing to pay for 5-star hotels and health and wellness services, in 5-star hospitals as well. Kun Anoma, do you have anything to add on this point?
Yes, I agree with well. Of course, we have a different segmentation, right? In general, people also concerned about the price to be a priority to consider for travel. But however, we still have another segment that is a middle to upper class that is still more stable for or less impact from this situation. So they still have a lot of potential to travel and they can consider Thailand as their destination after they cannot travel for the whole long period. So that is another opportunity that you can consider.
Yeah, that's right. As we've been to the road shows in Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan 2 years, and I saw that a lot of travel agents they also have high class travelers, clients who like to come to Thailand in smaller groups, and they will just go to luxury resorts and health and wellness retreats, resorts. So it's really a good group of segment that for the luxury hotels and resorts out there in Thailand would like to target. Yeah. Okay, so next question, please. Do the tourists from these countries prefer to speak English or Russian abroad? Might do not want to be seen as Russians abroad.
Well,
That's a very interesting question, and I think it has a reason why it was asked. We have seen the tendency for Russian-speaking tourists not to connect with other Russians abroad. This is true. This is true, and I think it remains quite the same till now. Many Russians or Russian-speaking tourists, either it's Uzbekistan or Kazakhstan, they prefer to stay apart from other tourists from their own countries. And the reason why is because they want to change their conditions. They want to feel themselves in a new circumstances rather than end up with the same group of people. I think it's quite understandable.
Yeah, thank you. This is an interesting question. I think some group of Kazakh and Uzbek who can speak English, and I would say that more Kazakh can speak English more than the Russians do. And if they can speak English, and they will prefer to speak English in Thailand as well. Yeah, they don't. They also want to differentiate themselves from the Russians. I could also say that. Yeah. All right. So let's jump to the next question. Afternoon, Kun Bao. A lot of our business for your region is via Russian business partners in Phuket. What cultural differences should we be aware of? So the cultural differences between Russian and Kazakh and Uzbek.
Wow,
In
this
the region?
this is a very deep question. Oh yes, I feel like I feel not very confident answering this question because it doesn't describe a specific situation. Different cultural differences between Thai people and Russian or Kazakh.
no, between Russian and Kazakhstan.
Kazakh.
Well, I think there are more similarities actually than differences. Really, both very informal. Both are quite entrepreneurial. I think there are more similarities rather between Russian and Kazakh. Well, rather than differences, really, it's hard to say how different those nationalities are.
I think Kazakhs are more like Russians than Uzbek. I think Uzbek, the difference there is the religion because most of them are Muslims, right? So the cultural difference is there that they prefer halal food and Muslim-friendly destinations. Is that correct?
Well, true. For Uzbekistan, it's more common that they have some other differences. They're a little less conservative, and therefore, I think those factors become in play.
And another thing is like Russian majority of Russian tourists to Thailand is women, and it's kind of woman influence. But Uzbekistan is a bit most of the tourists is men, and men is more influence for the trip rather than women. That's a bit different by the culture between men and women and in the Muslim countries. But however, if compared to other Muslim countries, it's not so strict for Kazakh and Uzbek or in terms of religion. But however, if compared to Russian, it's more Muslim. Religion involved with the way of the travel. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for this question. It is very interesting.
Thank you. So let's jump to the next question, please. What is the ranking of Thailand for outbound market if comparing to CIS countries as well?
In terms of outbound travel from Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, of course, the CIS countries are the top destinations. Those are Russia, Belarus, Ukraine. And of course, the number of people is much, much bigger going from Kazakhstan to Thailand. So I think we have seen the top 5, top 6 chart in the beginning of presentation. If we include non-CIS countries as well, probably the first ranks would be Russia and probably Ukraine.
Ukraine, yeah. I would say, yeah, Russia, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, and Uzbekistan.
Yes.
Yes.
Of course, cross-country ranking as well. So
Yeah,
Kazakhstan could be included.
The top 5 most popular destinations for long haul for the CIS tourists. Yeah.
Like for Uzbek, Thailand is number 6, right? For outbound tourists.
Yes.
That your previous slides, and for Thailand is number 5.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Yes. After Turkey, China, Egypt, UAE, for Kazakhstan, and Thailand is on the number 5 in the ranking. Okay, let's jump to the next question, please. What would be top Thailand destinations for Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan tourists? So cities, provinces.
Yeah, similarly to Russian market. Yeah. Say Phuket and Pattaya, beach and also of course Pattaya include Bangkok, and also getting more popular in Samui or the Phangan and also Koh Chang. Yeah, similar to Russian.
Yeah, so beach destinations. Yeah.
Yes, I can confirm that. Thank you.
All right, next question, please. So with the popularity of Thailand, how can we include late summer 2020 as well as winter for recovery travel to Thailand plus summer 2021? So late summer 2020 is August, September, as well as winter. So winter is October until March to Thailand, and plus summer again in 2021.
Great. Thank you.
So 3 periods of
I
time.
think it depends on Thailand as well. If Thailand open the border or after June, or it depends on when our country open the border, because actually that presentation talk about maybe the international flight we also can open for the countries that open the borders. So, but however, it should start with the regular flight. If we talk about positive scenario for summer, maybe just regular flight from Kazakh to or Uzbek to Thailand, but not charter flight. But for winter, it's possible to have charter flight if both sides are ready to travel. and also hopefully in next summer it also can have a direct flight also, and if more demand we can push more effort for create a charter flight in summer. It depends on the situation also.
Yeah, so we need to see when our country will be ready and open borders for international flights to fly in. And as many European markets say that they will be ready to fly in October, so beginning of autumn. So same as this markets, these two markets, yeah. Okay, so can you please jump to the next question, please? Could you explain the potential high-end business for Bangkok hotels? What will be the key factor to attract CAS clients to Bangkok hotels or Bangkok as a destination? Yes.
Thank you for question. Well, like we both said during presentation, we probably should expect that high-class tourists will continue traveling to Thailand, and they will be probably expecting the same level of quality and service as they have had before, and they would be ready and willing to pay for the same level of quality and services. So I think that if your hotels are targeting the high-class customers, probably it will make sense to continue doing so, and to improve your proposition, it would probably be good to come up with additional value-added services for those tourists to make a preference onto Bangkok hotels.
Yes, can I add one more factor that these tourists in the CAS countries also like to look at? It's a family-friendly facility. So because the majority of the CAS travelers travel with their family, with small children. So if your hotels, 5-star hotels for high-end business, Bangkok hotels, and you have facilities for kids, for family to enjoy and experience, and that will be, another good factor for this market. Do you agree, Kun Anoma?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and also shopping and also dining. If we talk about high-end travelers, Bangkok is like a center of this kind of things, so it can be attract the tourists who stay in Bangkok. And similar behavior with Russian market also for both countries.
A nice fruit basket, when they arrive or when they about to leave, would be a really nice compliment to give to tourists from the CAS markets, because they love fruit so much. I would say that.
And also spa, wellness things also very attractive for both markets.
Great. So we have one more question left. So let's jump to the last question as we're running out of time. After COVID-19, which segment will likely to travel to Thailand first? I think we just mentioned in the previous answer, but you can answer to this, Valikan.
Well, middle range to high class would be likely to travel to Thailand again. We might expect some decline in number of arrivals in the middle range budget. Still, the high class, we think, has become even richer in those circumstances economically, and will continue to travel internationally, including Thailand. Well, I must say that the people going to Thailand are planning their trips to the country quite well ahead, and I think they had and still have such plans to go to Thailand when the circumstances, the borders, the air transportation will be available and back to normal.
Thank you, Valikan. Kun Anoma, would you like to add to this question?
Yeah, I agree. Like a middle to high end market and also family, I think is still ready to travel.
Yeah, and what about the younger group that you mentioned in your earlier presentation, Kun Valikan, the millennials, aged between 25 to 35? When would they come back? Would they be the first or second group to come back?
Well, this group of people is, of course, quite willing and quite economically active, but they are quite remain vulnerable to economic downturns. The devaluation, the general economic worsening is, of course, will affect the buying power. But their intention and willingness to travel will remain, of course. We'll see some decline, definitely. We have to honestly accept that. But the actual focus and numbers and percentages right now is quite premature to do, because we will only be able to do so when the travel agencies are back to normal and will start receiving the requests. This is when we will see how the picture changed for this group of people as well.
All right, thank you, and thank you for all the questions. It looks like we have covered all of the questions. And is there anything else anyone wanted to cover before I wrap up? No? Okay, great. If
Thank you
there's
for your attention.
yes.
Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Kun Valikan. Thank you, Kun Anoma, and for sharing us useful insights and trends of the two new emerging markets, Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. And thank you, our audience and partners out there, for joining us today and being a part of this webinar, as well as our global teams who are doing incredible job given the current situation. And let's hope that our industry will bounce back as soon as possible. And the next session will happen tomorrow, the 19th of May at 10 a.m., featuring the Malaysian market, entitled Moving Ahead, Identifying Malaysia Tourism Opportunity, with discussion topics on Thailand, a destination of varieties, and growing Thailand as a halal destination. And you can reserve your seat now by registering for the next session by clicking on the blue TT event logo on the top left of your screen, or visit the TT webinar site at tourismthailand.org/webinar. Last but not least, we would like to ask for your kind cooperation to please share your feedback and suggestions by filling in our short questionnaire. Its icon is located next to the Q&A, and all TT webinar sessions are recorded and available on the TT webinar homepage in the past event section. You can use the same access code you used to join this webinar today to watch the replay. And you can also download the presentation slides below the screen. Once again, thank you for joining us today. สวัสดีค่ะ